Hello everyone, welcome back to kind of a book review. So this book I have mentioned many years now, and so it doesn't feel proper to quite call this a book review, but it also kind of is now that I've finally finished it. So on my Patreon I will have a very full discussion, and of course if you are looking into this book and you want someone to go along with, I went through this entire book, and of course I didn't share all of the information because obviously like go buy this book and you can take the course from him. But I talked about my entire journey as I was going through it on my Patreon, so we talk about the exercises, different chapters and stuff, so if you want that, it's over on my Patreon. So initially, I had bought this book in 2015 at the very first time I met my now husband, and he told me about this book, and I was like, well, I haven't heard of that author before, so I'll go buy it. So I did, way back when I was in college, and I got it, and then I never really did much with it because I was like, meditation is so overrated. I don't like to meditate. And so I read maybe a chapter or two, put it on the shelf, didn't look at it. Fast forward to 2017, ran back into my husband, and then we actually started dating at that point. And again, he mentioned this book. I grabbed it off the shelf and I was like, yeah, about that. Maybe I should read through it. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should actually do the book. And thus began a years-long journey to get through this book. So I had started it somewhere between 2017 and 2018. And then I definitely started the grand journey of, I'm gonna get through this book, I'm gonna get through this book, I'm gonna get through this book in 2018. And so in 2018, I had intentions to do this book, but I kept catching myself with a similar mantra every time. I don't want to be stuck in my head. I don't want to be stuck in my head. And this book is stuck in your head. It's all meditations, and I just was not in a space where I was even open to accepting that at all, and because of that I just constantly put this book aside. I would get a couple chapters in and then I just would back off instantly. And of course life would happen, it'd go to the back burner, and then I'd get more excited about a different thing and be like, oh, that book's just meditation. That's it, I don't care. And of course, being me, I was convinced that I didn't need this book, that meditation was not something I needed to do. It was just one of those things that people tell you to do, but you don't necessarily have to do it. And so many a times I would argue with the book, and I would just put it away, and then inevitably it would start nagging again, and I would get many messages from my guides that I needed to work on this book, and so I'd pick it back up, do it for a couple months, drop it back on the shelf. And so the very last time that I decided that I was going to get through this book, I had a system in place, I was ready to do it, and I was sick of constantly saying I'm going to do it and then not, and I wanted to fulfill that. So when October 31st of last year, 2021 rolled around, I officially was like, this is the last time I'm doing this. I'm getting through this book. And so I initially had the plan of I'll get through it when I get through it. If I do it before a year, that's fine. I've spent so much time on this book, let's just get it over with. It did end up taking the full year, but it really was a lot of effort. And so that's one of the things you need to keep in mind with this book. It is surprisingly very energy and time consuming to get through. It's not an easy or fun witchy book to go through. You're not creating beautiful altars and collecting your tools and all of the fun stuff that you would associate typically with beginning on your witchcraft journey. It has absolutely none of that. The most tools you get is like incense and a candle. That's about it, really. And the majority of this book is just starting to learn the mental exercises that you need in order to go further in the path. And I hated that. I like the pretty shinies of the craft. I love having my beautiful altars and all of my tools. And to not use that for an entire year of study was like, but why? Like, it's so boring. And so if you're like that, you gotta be ready to have that mentality before you jump into this book, because that is what it is. You are meditating, that is your exercises the entire way through. Now that said, once you can get over that mental hurdle and you're like prepared to do meditations as your things, it's surprisingly really good. Pretty early on you end up getting a meditation to do for the new and the full moon, and then also for the wheel of the year, so in a way you're starting to celebrate. It's very small. It's very easy to do. And it's something that I will probably be continuing along in my practice. There's a number of things I'll be continuing on from this book that it's like, this would be nice to do on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. And some I don't feel like I'm ever gonna have to do again, but it was good to experience it at least once. And that's the thing about this book. He tries to show you a lot of different techniques and a lot of different things that you'll be doing to kind of prep you for the other books. I can't say what the other books are gonna be yet. I've only bought it, and the most I did was I went to the table of contents and planned out the next year. That's as far as I've gone. So that said, this book, the way that I was able to really get through this book was to buy the CD companion. You might not feel like you need to have that. I felt like it made a huge difference for me. Now, there isn't a track for every single one, and he hasn't made it available as like an MP3, or I think we're on MP4 now. But whatever, it's not available on a digital format yet. He's talked about eventually doing that, but right now it's CDs. I went to Walmart and bought one for like 20 bucks because surprisingly I didn't have a CD player. So I have one now, and I have the CDs for I think the first 3 books now. I'm planning on getting them all, but having that CD made such a difference. There is something when you're struggling to do a meditation on your own, that having it guided in the background made it so much easier. And again, it's not for all of them, so the ones that it didn't kind of sucked, because it is a little bit of a crutch sometimes, but that's okay. Once you get to the end of the book, you do feel like you can do it on your own. Like you've made that mental muscle actually functionable, and you can do it on your own. You don't need the book. There's plenty of times now where I go to do a spell or a ritual, and I can hear Penczak's voice in my head of the whole countdown system he does before you go into your meditative state to go do your rituals or whatever. And I always catch myself actively doing that now. And before, I just really didn't feel like those were necessary. And having done it for a year, I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. So it's little stuff like that that you just catch yourself and you're like, oh, yeah. But having that CD really helped so much. So the CD companion has 4 CDs, and there's like 3 to 4 tracks per disc, and they usually run about 25-ish minutes. Some might be a little closer to 20, some might be closer to 30, so plan accordingly to have that time set aside, but it made such a difference. The next thing that really helped me a lot was to acknowledge that some of these things I'm only going to have to do once. I don't necessarily need to keep doing it. And then there's other ones that I was actually excited to go back and do. And some of the recommended readings I read as I was going through this book, others I didn't. The premise of this book is meditation. And once you get through this book, you really do feel like you have a better grasp on it. And that's saying something. I've been a witch for 13 years, and I've been working through this book for so many. As much as I've hated meditation over the years, once I actually made myself go through this book and do the meditations, it got easier. It's not to say every time I was totally ecstatic to do another meditation, but by the end, I could appreciate how it's valuable to your craft. And it's nice to not have the just quietly focusing on your breath for 15 minutes meditations. They're very active and very full of different imagery, and like eventually you get to go to the world tree and you have your own inner temple, obviously, towards the very end. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. You get to try out a few different types of divination, and it's a lot in this book that it takes some time to get into. The beginning of the book is really slow, but you kind of need that slow progression, and then once you're at the end, you're like, oh, now it makes sense. And I have yelled at the author plenty of times that I'm like, shut up, Penczak, I don't want to do it again. I don't want to have to do all of this. And then I do, and I'm like, fine, you're right, it helped. The more I've been doing this book and listening to what he said, it does make a difference. It has helped my craft a lot. I'm very excited to see how the next book goes. But if you feel like you just need a foundation to your craft, that you've been stumbling around, just learning different things here and there, this is a really good resource for a year and a day study. Again, he doesn't go through all of the tools and stuff because it's a full series. I think there's like 6 books-ish in the series. So there's quite a few. I will eventually get through them all. And I mean, some of them I'm not totally excited about, because there's one that's like just on the, I'm gonna mispronounce it, Quabala, whatever, whole book on that. Not totally psyched about it because it's not a topic I really care. But the other stuff, I'm very excited to see how it goes. And at the end, you get to make a little craft as part of your completion of year 1. And it's just really a good resource. And it is where a lot of the teachers will tell you to begin. You need to be able to visualize, you need to be able to do energy work before you move into the tools aspect and like the physical of the craft. And this book, as much as it's not the most exciting part to begin with, when you're ready to have that foundational work, when you've gotten past the ooh shiny pretty of starting on the craft, this is a really good resource. I've tried a few other Year in a Day books of actually going through them. I haven't loved them, but I feel like this one was probably the best one I have ever done. Now, if I was teaching another witch, would I have them go through this as the first book? Probably not. I would let them have some of the pretty shinies and then move into this stuff personally, but I'm really glad I finally finished this book. I'm really proud of myself for actually doing it. So, like I said, on Patreon, I have the full book of me going through each chapter and talking about it and how it's going for me, and how some things I loved and some things I didn't like as I was going through the book, so that's over on my Patreon if you want to go through it together. Again, I don't give all the details of the book because, like, you should buy the book. It's really a discussion as if we were both going through it and having, like, a study group of, like, a couple things stood out here and there, or this exercise felt really weird and this one was really cool. Like, not going into the exact details of it, but just kind of talking about it, so I would definitely recommend you go check that out. I'll be doing the same thing for Outer Temple of Witchcraft, which is the sequel to this book, and that will be coming up here probably in the next like week or so. Speaking of which, thank you to my patrons. I will have their names here on the screen if you would like to support me and get access to exclusive content. It is over there at patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.